Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Ian Trottier. His last name is spelled Trottier. And if you're watching this on my three returned YouTube channels, X, Rockfin, Rumble, you'll see the title of his new book. He published it in 2025. The full title is High Stakes Treason: How John Brennan Compromised American Security for Millions. I've kind of kept my eye on Brennan. I can't say that I've followed it a lot, but he shows up in very odd places. He has an interesting background. And he kind of jumped, my understanding is he jumped from working for the Republicans to the Democrats. So he's kind of had a long 30-year history. I listened to an interview with Ian today. This is not his first book. He's like me. He's from the Bay Area. He graduated in Oregon. He's worked as an entrepreneur, community organizer, and has been an advocate for the everyday citizen. In 2007, he founded iPark, a company focused on parking solutions, which he later sold to Imperial Parking. His passion for discourse and truth led him to create the Discussions of Truth podcast in 2016, which has gained attention for candid discussions on politics, society, and personal empowerment. He also ran as a candidate for the United States House of Representatives in Florida's District 27 in 2018. And I hope he runs again because we need a whole new group of people in Washington, D.C., because this is a total disaster. But it's a really interesting book. It has interesting people who I watch on media all the time. John Kiriaki's on all these shows I listen to. So he wrote a foreword. Roger Stone, people should know him. Both people who've had unfortunate run-ins with the state. I mean, you can call it the deep state. I think it's just the state the way it is now. But a lot of that stuff isn't that deep anymore, and we need to know about it. So I'm glad Ian's on the show. He was recommended to me, by Mark Shaw. So hi, Mark, and thanks for the recommendation. I'll have Mark on my show on his new book on Wednesdays. Today is Monday, the 24th. So I'm planning on talking to Mark Shaw on the 26th. So keep an eye out. We're going to talk about his new great books. All his books are great. My dad actually has a lot of Mark Shaw's books. He likes them too. So anyway, it's Ian Trottier, and the full title again is High Stakes Treason. So Ian, welcome to the show.
William, pleasure. I appreciate it. Mark is a good friend of both of ours, and it's nice to have that. As we were talking offline, he's prolific in how he researches and meticulous in the information that he puts out. So I'm glad he's still doing what he does. And he recommended, I think, me to you, and so I appreciate that. I just talking about the California and the Bay Area. I was just flagged on TikTok for posting something about Bohemian Grove. Now, I've had a couple of friends that are actually members of the Bohemian Grove. There's all types of different layers and camps in there, and it's certainly, if there's nefarious things that happen out of the Bohemian Grove, that's not something that's every member would be culpable of. And I know that Alex Jones 25 years ago kind of made a name for himself for exposing some of the woods deals done at the Bohemian Grove. I personally never gone, but the interesting thing is I was flagged literally like an hour ago. I was flagged on TikTok for posting something about the Bohemian Grove. Very interesting. It was against their community guidelines. So getting information out these days, as we all know, in this age of censorship, whoever's programming the algorithms will certainly just kind of flag whatever they want. I'm good friends with a former Google whistleblower. His name is Zach Voorhees, and he lives there in San Francisco. He and I worked extensively for a short period of time to try to get his information out. And I think politically, he was actually a liberal. And then he saw, when he was working for Google for about 8 years, he was seeing their algorithms acting inappropriately politically. And I'll use the word raided, because I know the FBI stormed into his apartment, blocked off the whole block. Helicopter was in the air. It was a pretty big scene for Zach when he blew that whistle, and the DOJ did nothing. So he had to go to Rutgers grad James O'Keefe to expose his stuff. But that was a few years ago now, close to 10 probably, Google leaks. is the name of his book, and it's co-written with another really good guy, Kent Heckenlively. So, the California, just as a state as a whole, unfortunately, it gets a bad rap, I think, because of the people that have controlled it politically. But historically, it's a very strong state.
I think it's a red state. I hate to interrupt, but it's a red state.
Yeah,
They've just
yeah.
stolen it. I think that's all through fraud, and it's gone downhill in one generation. Like, I grew up there since 1970, so I've seen San Francisco turn into a wasteland. And I'm not joking. Like, people say, "Oh, you're exaggerating." No, it was a lively, culturally vibrant city with a lot of things going on. It's turned into some kind of weird, sterile tech dystopia mix. It's really not good. The culture's terrible. Sorry to interrupt.
No, no, and that's great. And William, you mentioned that you're a Berkeley grad, and actually one of the members, he's now deceased, but one of the two people that I've known that have been members of the Bohemian Grove, one of them was actually a Cal grad and happened to be politically very conservative. And I think that's an identity that has slipped, and I would certainly support that argument that state is red, and they rig the computer systems. There's a great book out there written. Actually, I started the podcast in Miami back in 2016 in a small neighborhood called Wynwood. And one of the initial books I came across was a book written by the Collier brothers, Collier, the Collier brothers. And the book that they wrote is called The Vote Scam, The Stealing of America, I believe is the subtitle. And what they do is they look at elections just after JFK, starting with LBJ. And they're tying it into IBM and Columbia University and some of these things. So what their argument is, frankly, the U.S. elections for the office of the president have been rigged since that time, which would mean the Bushes, Clinton, Obama, and arguably even Trump. They're simply part of what I would call the Hegelian dialectic, which is the yin and the yang, and to create a conflict, right? And we're very close to that. We have such a strong dichotomy of political thinking today. It's never been like this since I've been around.
I think that the anger is really there, but I think that this real support for the left is probably 25-30% max. And so then this whole notion that they're getting 50% of the vote is totally fake. They're getting another 20% somewhere, because you can just walk around. Most people, they're not even that right, with culturally that right. They just think it's a bunch of like these crazy people on the left. They're not part of it. And so I think that it's all staged and fake. And I think it probably goes all the way back to Kennedy. And these like votes, these weird things happen right at the end. We just have to keep counting, or there's a miracle thing that happens in Miami. Like, I've seen it so many times that I think Trump had overwhelming support in 2020. So it's still around, and it's just massive fraud. It's just massive criminality. I used to say that there was tens and hundreds of billions missing. I think the fraud is so bad there's trillions of dollars not wasted but flat out stolen through NGOs and things like that. They've stolen the future of the country. It's so bad. It's really, really, really bad.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And just to kind of get back on the background, get to some of the background, one of the early topics that I started talking about on Wynwood, and somebody actually asked me I was looking into the Zika virus, and I found the Rockefellers associated to a patent on the extraction process of the Zika virus, which is a naturally occurring virus discovered in the Uganda forest, but they were funded by the science was funded by the Rockefeller Institute. And that's like in the 1920s. And this relatively benign virus all of a sudden comes up into Miami from Brazil during this kind of global event. I think it was a World Cup at the time. Pretty sure that's what it was. And it causes this media frenzy local to Miami. I just like, there's something really off about this. And a good friend of mine invited me to a Miami Beach City Council meeting, and I'm listening to the debates, and I just thought this is absurd. So the more I began digging into it, of course, I'm following the money, and it leads me to this guy, Anthony Sutton. So everybody going back to the Bay Area. Anthony Sutton is a former Stanford Hoover Institute fellow, and he wrote a book. Literally, William, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this or not, but he wrote a book called The Federal Reserve Conspiracy. He was born in England, and I think he went to, I think he taught at UC Northridge or Cal State Northridge, It's not a UC. And then he gets hired by the Hoover Institute. Yeah, they ended up literally almost firing him. Again, it's censorship, right? So he walks away from his position instead of being fired. But he's giving a speech actually in Miami Beach at a Republican convention, it happens to be, and he's talking about some of this fraud and some of the Bush family fraud involved in Nazi Germany. And he's written a book, I believe at the time, Wall Street somehow building up the Nazi regime
and the Russian Revolution, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, Bolshevik. Yeah. And so that book, The Federal Reserve Conspiracy, just kind of really caught my eye. And you're looking in a couple hundred years worth of arguments in that regard. But since 1913, of course, when the Federal Reserve Act is passed by Woodrow Wilson, so this all is all kind of some of the preliminary discussions that I'm having, right? And about a year and a half into the podcast in Wynwood, I invite John Kiriakou on the program. John Kiriakou, of course, blew the whistle on the waterboarding at Guantanamo under the Bush administration. And as you said, William, he's written one of the forwards. So he and I had kind of stayed in contact over the years. He probably joined my show in 2018. And fortunately, what I didn't realize, William, is that he has like a long list of complaints of John Brennan. And so anyway, so that's one of the forwards in the book. There's 3 forwards. Brooks Agnew is the other one besides Roger Stone. And Brooks Agnew, people don't know who he is. He's incredible. He's on Midnight, what's it called? Caravan to Midnight, quite often with George Norrie. He is a former speechwriter for Alan Keyes. Alan Keyes, I think Princeton grad, ran for president a few times. So that's Brooks Agnew. But of course, the main person who gets his name on the cover is the great Roger Stone. So anyway, yeah, it all kind of starts for me, William, in the Wynwood district of Miami in 2016, and I'm just kind of following the paper trail of various things. And we've got such a madhouse going on. Before I start talking about the book, I think it's pretty interesting, right? So you've got John Brennan here, who's obviously an American. I think he was born in Brooklyn, and then he's raised. I don't know if I've got that right or not, but he's raised basically in New Jersey, across the river there. And I believe he was a cutout used by the deep state to carry out their mission. What I'm saying is he's an admitted communist. According to Roger Stone, 4 different times on lie detectors he's admitted to voting for Communist USA president candidate for president. And while he was at University of Texas, Houston, he voted for the candidate then, the communist candidate for president then. And again, I think it's Guy Hall. I'm not quite positive on that. The book doesn't concentrate on that. But my point is this: is you've got an admitted communist that under Obama becomes the head of the CIA. And so the book talks about years leading up to that appointment as a director of CIA, when he's serving as a senior advisor to the Homeland Security. But also something that you and I had mentioned, that you brought it up, is his Islamic conversion ties. And I believe that happens when he was in Saudi Arabia. So you've got basically 2 really main, large kind of red flags if you are a constitutional Republican, right? That is basically a citizen and promoter of the Republic under its Constitution. That's how I kind of define that. Regardless of whether a person is Democrat or Republican or independent or Green Party or whatever they are, right? I mean, we live under a republic, a constitutional republic. That is the design of the government that we operate, right, since 1776, essentially, and 17 under the Constitution, which is 1792. If I got that right. But ironically, you have Donald Trump, and I'm skipping around here a lot, but I'll kind of come back in. Ironically, you have Donald Trump receiving an admitted Democrat Socialist Party member, aka a communist, right, born in Africa. And I'm speaking of Zoran Mandami. You welcome into the Oval Office, right? You're openly welcoming an openly admitted communist into the Oval Office, where he essentially calls Donald Trump a fascist. Which if I was Donald Trump, I personally, I respect all points of views. But communism, that's where I kind of draw the line, just because it's never been productive in China, it's never been productive in Russia, it's not been productive in Cuba, it's not been productive. Yeah, it's productive for a very small few people that hold all the power and hold the controls. So yes, it's productive for them, but it basically
it's productive in making
and basically
bodies. It's productive in stacking bodies high like cordwood. That's what it's productive about.
yeah, and
It's
taking
killed more
people's
people. 100
right to
million.
their own, right?
Read the Black Book of Communism. 100 million dead. They kill people like crazy. That's what they don't get.
Nazi done.
It's like the left has this kind of like touchy-feely thing, but if you go back to Lenin, they use the French Revolution as a model. The communists do, and that is kill off the aristocracy. That's what they do. They murder them. Then that's what these people don't get. They don't understand the ruthlessness. These are not people who are religious. They're not Christians. They're atheists. They just waste people like crazy. They don't care about it. So, I mean, when somebody says communist, that's what they mean. They're going to take your money and kill you. That's what it's all distilled. Lenin wrote about that stuff. They hide it all. I know this history very well.
Yeah. So here you have John Brennan, right? So he's an admitted communist now. He's he's working in the Obama administration, lurking in the background. And I'm on. I self-finance this because this is how strongly I believe in the contents of this book. Obviously, right? I self-financed my trip to DC last month, and I took 100 copies. And I'm going back and forth. I'm down Pennsylvania Avenue, and then I walk back and forth and take a suitcase full of books. And literally, I go into the Rayburn, I go into the different offices or the buildings on the House side, and then over on the Senate side, and I'm literally passing out copies of this book. So right now, there are 100 copies of this book in various offices, including Nancy Pelosi's office, which is also interesting, right? Because finally, she says she's going to hang up the skates there. But there's 100 copies of this book on Capitol Hill, and I was actually able to get 5 different meetings while I was in DC about a week and a half for people to go through and talk about the subject matter. And one meeting I'll just blatantly mention. One meeting flat out with Marsha Blackburn's office, her lead economist and the lead legal attorney, and they just kind of looked 45 minutes. I take my intel source and myself into the office, and they just kind of look at us like this glazed over look, like deer in the headlights, even after 45 minutes. And then finally, they give up. I think the contents of this book is so shattering. It's so fringe. When people really, if they slow down and really go through the engineering that the former head of the CIA concocted on the American people for the abuse, the manipulation, it's parallel to vomit. I mean, it's so astonishing what this man has done. And so look, he's been subpoenaed. I believe an indictment will come down. I think Comey and Letitia James, their cases just got thrown out. That doesn't mean they won't get picked back up. They've both been thrown out as of this morning. This is going to be a little bit more difficult in my view. It's going to be a little bit more difficult for John Brennan to get around this. It came out, William, the 22nd of July. And the first show I did was with Steve Bannon. He has me on the show with Natalie Winters. And he calls the book the most meticulously, or he calls it I think it was the most exquisitely timed release of a book in the history of publishing. I joined Roger Stone's show about a month and a half after that, I suppose. And he calls it one of the most important and shocking books he's read in his 50 years of politics. Last week, I joined a podcast with a guy named Nick No, who's known as the Benghazi whistleblower. He calls the book the most important book ever written. I think that shows the thirst that Americans are craving to have some answers, and what this book delivers is something much more powerful than All the President's Men, Watergate. This delivers a meticulously designed showcase of how John Brennan abused his office, and it goes back. You can argue that this man, again, as I mentioned, he was a cutout, and in many ways, not to give him a pass here in any ways, but I think in some ways, in many ways, and an unwitting kind of puppet He's a sympathizer. He sympathized, and so he was used. I believe he was propelled. He was propped up by George Tenet and some of these people in the CIA to be that turning key to open that door. And that is essentially, if we pull back and we look at what really is the main objective here, if that is true, right? If that statement that I just made is true, then really what is the main objective? To utilize this person to carry out an agenda and open certain doors. And then it's the global war on terror, right? And then ultimately it's disarming Americans and taking away guns, right? Because that is, in my opinion, the main objective for these kind of black swan events, where you have these mass shootings. Is there MK Ultra involved? One doesn't know, but then they create these major crises, and the objective, of course, is gun rights. It always seems to resurface, right?
They're always talking about it on TV. We've got to stop the guns. But they're super. Yeah. I've done shows on this. Like a lot of these shooters are hyper suspicious. They're not very. They're super. I mean, we don't know much about this guy who supposedly killed Kirk or whatever, Tyler Robinson, but he's just one of many. Like there's a lot we didn't know much about crooks. And then like Tucker Carlson comes out and he gets all this information that was never disclosed to the public. I didn't see it. I looked for stuff. These are just some guys do these lists. I had a guest on who did a list of the mass shootings. They're not even published. There's so many of them. It's crazy. You wouldn't believe it. I mean, You probably could. So, I mean, this guy's the head of it. Like, it's really incredible. And there's so many assassins and strange things. This guy becomes the head of the CIA, I think, in like February, March 2013. Then Michael Hastings dies 3 months later. That's hyper suspicious. It just goes on and on. For people who don't know, talk about Brennan's background, because he was tainted. One of the reasons he became CIA head later is he was tainted by his past, right? By his actions.
For sure.
Under Bush.
Yeah. So what I basically, as I'm walking the halls of Congress, right, the congressional offices, not the Capitol building, because when I was there, the government was shut down, but they still had their offices open. And as I'm walking and I'm meeting with staff members, talking to staff members, I said, look, what you get in this book is basically the motive behind John Brennan orchestrating the Russian collusion hoax with it was seen with Hillary Clinton and Obama, basically the side dog. But yeah, I'm saying that lightly. Essentially, it sounds like Clinton used Obama, this guy Brennan, right? Used Brennan to orchestrate and create this connection with the British and Steele dossier, and then fabricate the whole illusion of the Russians manipulating the election. But Brennan is pretty much, and I think Trump has even said this, Brennan is seemed to be the key figure in this. This book would show relatively motive behind that, and why he would make it personal, right? Why he would make it personal. Talking about the background on John Brennan, he's basically involved in this kind of global war on terror. The years that lead up to the global war on terror. One of my main objectives is, if this book really picks up and I can get members of Congress talking about it, which is again my objective, right? The objective is to get this guy in court and answering questions regarding the research. There's 106 pages of an appendix, White House visitor logs, SEC documents, ex-key score documents, so people understand how Edward Snowden and his whistleblowing fold into this, and the knowledge which prove essentially the knowledge that this individual John Brennan had of, let's call it, the Tsarnaev brothers as they enter the country, the 4 visas that he approves of the 1911 hijackers. Roger Stone addresses that in his forward. This is basically a guy that has, given the benefit of the doubt, he's simply been brainwashed by the global agenda to the degree that he is now willing to sacrifice lives of the very people he has been hired to protect. And I'm talking about that Boston Marathon bombing. There's 3 terror attacks that we talk about in the book. The first one is 2009, and the fellow that boards a flight in Amsterdam, headed toward Detroit. That bomb never went off. The other terror attack was actually a NATO ally. So we're looking at article number 5. And that's very important, because what we see is that the NSA and the NCTC, National Counterterrorism Center, has knowledge of the history of the Google searches, as a matter of fact, that this guy Anders Breivik is doing, and this manifesto. That would mean U.S. intel had knowledge that this person was preparing to attack. They did nothing to stop it, particularly John Brennan, because what we identify in high stakes treason, and there's a reason why I say we, because again, I mentioned I have an intel source, and that's the person that really is to be receiving the credit for all of this information regarding John Brennan and how he compiled and engineered this scheme on the American people. But what we know is that through something called code word compartments, you can basically, right, you can, like I'm talking about TikTok flagging this post I make on the Bohemian Glove. So what this program through a company called the Analysis Corporation is able to do is they're able to aggregate all the terror movements globally. And then it feeds in as a government contract, it's feeding in to NSA. And the NSA technology dating back to, I think it's 1971, they're able to compartmentalize. So if you want to flag a particular terror, a suspect or terror informant or asset that you're using, if you're in the CIA as an example, like Anwar al-Awlaki, okay, the guy that orchestrated the USS Cole bombing before 9/11. Anwar al-Awlaki, what we show in this book was a CIA asset. He was born in New Mexico. He becomes an imam in Virginia after his days in San Diego, and you basically he's used to create radicalism, right? And kind of foster people that are in kind of eating from the honeypots, and then you build them up. And
they wanted to create radicalization. A lot of people don't understand that the deep state intel agenda is to create radicals. He's involved in that. Brennan's involved in these drone strikes that create radicals in Yemen. And that's very important. If people don't remember, I'm old enough to remember the Cole bombing, but that was kind of the predicate and lead up to 9/11, right? So if this guy really is a CIA agent, this Anwar al-Awlaki, it's very telling, because these are huge events, and these are on the TV all the time. Like, I barely watch TV anymore because I know there's no use for it for me, but Brennan's on TV all the time. All this stuff is pounded into the consciousness of the American public.
Yeah. So what I was getting at was, if I'm successful, right, and the book kind of does what I believe it was meant to do, and that is to expose crimes of John Brennan. You've got him right now, Jim Jordan, right, and his committee. They've got him on perjury charges. It looks like.
Yeah, let me bring that up.
That's probably going to be pretty easy to get around if you're John Brennan. I joined a podcast a few weeks ago. They're called The Awake Nation, and they reached out to Thomas Speciale, who's a former NCTC analyst, and he confronted John Brennan in a video that went viral a couple weeks ago about the emails. You remember seeing that?
Yeah, he got really angry on stage, right? Let me see if I can bring that up.
Yeah. Brennan literally calls it BS. He calls it bullshit, BS, and then he says it's disinformation, and that's right on camera. Camera's got that. And then he gets confronted at an after hours party where this Thomas Speciale confronts him again, and I believe he physically pokes this guy Speciale in the chest. There's a video of Brennan physically. Yeah, there's a video there.
Yeah, we can play that. Do you want to play it?
Yeah, let's play it.
Okay, let's play it. Okay, cool. Let me see if I can get this to work. It's usually up in the air whether my technical skills can do it. I gotta stop this, share screen. This is titled John Brennan Explodes on Former Senior Advisor, NCSC, which you've been talking about. Oh, Dan, Thomas Especial, George Mason. Yeah. Let's see if hopefully you'll hear the audio.
Wait, why don't we go ahead and start?
Do you hear the audio on that?
I hear it, yeah.
Okay,
Taking audience questions. Sound good? Why don't we start over here? It should be on.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Tom Speciale. I've been a career intelligence officer for over 20 years, in the military for over 34 years. I recently left the DNI as a senior advisor for Tulsi Gabbard on counterintelligence and security. And in fact, I made many of the suggestions on dismantling some of the things that are being dismantled, and also made some suggestions on improvements, which I'd love to talk to you guys afterwards and get your feedback on, because hopefully it's going to be going to some important desks very shortly. I want to agree completely, Director, with your assessment on Iran being on their heels. We've got to keep them on their heels until they reform. We've got to do that. I disagree on the deep state, only because Trump says it's the deep state. But as we all know, it's really just the entrenched bureaucrats that run the country. I'll get to my question, I will.
Yeah, please.
But I want to establish sort of my bona fides on this question before I ask it, because I really hesitated to put you guys on the spot on this in public. But if you're not going to be at the after hours, I got to take my chance now. I was at the DNI when the first ICA was released regarding cyber influence on the 2016 election. I was there. I was working in the NIM. I read it. I also was involved in setting up the principals committee meeting that took place in December that resulted in President Obama directing a more fulsome, because I understand the difference between a cyber ICA and a total whole of government ICA intelligence collection on Russian involvement or influence in the election. And I noticed immediately in the ICA, the second ICA, because I had access to the classified ICA, that there were statements in that ICA that were not supported with the sourcing that was associated to the ICA, specifically that that Putin had directed the action, and that Putin had that the Russians were actively trying to support President Trump instead of just sow chaos.
Your question.
My question. There was an email that went around from General Clapper to yourself and Hayden. I'm sorry, not Hayden.
That's right.
Yourself and Comey, et cetera, that basically said we all got to get on board with this, otherwise it isn't going to work, basically. And I think that email puts everybody in the crosshairs. I would like to hear what your justification was for supporting the dossier that was known to be false being used as source material in the second ICA.
I don't know who put you up to this.
Nobody put me up to this, sir. I'm here on my
I don't know
own.
what role you played or who you are, but it's a bunch of bullshit that you just passed on.
The emails are clear, sir.
Bullshit.
The emails are clear.
Bullshit.
The emails are clear, people. For those listening, they're very clear.
The emails are clear. The second question
No, I think we're going to.
is
Look, you can, look, we can talk about it.
Did he just say next over and over again?
Yeah. Yeah. So the person saying next right there is Hayden, and Hayden is the guy that Intel school at George Mason is named for. So Hayden is a very important person that does not obviously want to continue talking about that. And Hayden, I've reached out to Hayden as well. I haven't gotten a response. And by the way, so folks know, I've tried to contact John Brennan because I'd like to get his comments on the contents of the book, and so has a reporter that I've worked very closely with over the past year at the Daily Mail. She too has tried to get John Brennan for comments, in so much that she has an article ready to release, approved by her editor, but stalled from the legal department at the Daily Mail because John Brennan will not respond to their reach outs. That's what I'm told. I've got a similar thing going on at the New York Post, where I'll just mention Miranda Devine. Miranda Devine is known about this book for again about the same period of time, a little bit longer. She was the first kind of large, noble, common journalist. She's got a big name. She was the first person to know about this, and she hasn't released her article on this book either. And William, I literally, because I used a literary agent in New York to get this book published with Post Hill Press, who also is publishing Abuse of Power, Mark Shaw's book. Mine is an imprint of Post Hill called Bombardier Books, but it is the CEO of Post Hill that I work directly with. The literary agent in New York has had Miranda involved in this, and she hasn't published. I went back for a panel discussion a few months ago where Gavin McGinnis, the founder of the Proud Boys, was on that panel discussion to talk about this book. And I literally walked down to Newsmax offices and I hand delivered the copy of this book to the COO of Newsmax. Newsmax and Rob Finnerty is somebody that I've been communicating with for the past year. Newsmax has not even mentioned this book that I know, as far as I know. So those are three main, which you can kind of consider, right? Mainstream media. They're not independent people like you and I. They're mainstream media sources that have yet talked about this book. Hayden's reaction there, next. I personally believe that there are elements of, from my research, I would call the Council on Foreign Relations, because how I view American media, it all kind of streams through their control. They are a Manhattan-based political think tank that essentially controls the strings of Wall Street. It was developed by a J.P. Morgan lawyer, Elihu Root. That's how the Council on Foreign Relations came into existence, 1921. And they have puppeted mainstream media since then, in my view. So there's probably some, these higher powers there that are squashing stories like this. Right now, they're doing a pretty good job because I now have people in those three sources that have said that they're interested, but somebody above them is squashing this story. That's what it appears like to me. John Brennan basically has been caught red-handed. And William, let me go into the background of how I got involved in this John Brennan story, because it's not, Steve Bannon referred to me as an expert. I think you use that word. There's people that know much more about John Brennan than I do. In fact, John Brennan he was on my radar, but it wasn't like I was deliberately trying to expose malfeasance of this individual until I met my intel source, and that was at a CPAC in Maryland, and I was conducting my podcast when a friend of mine walked this fellow up to my booth, and he placed a binder in front of me, and he identified himself as a former FBI agent, made it clear that he was no longer working with the FBI, that he had been let go from the FBI many years ago, but he had spent over a decade in the FBI, and he was actually given a commendation award, right? So a recognition by the FBI for his ability to perform his duties. So he's by all other indications, he's a stalwart member of the FBI. So he presents this binder in front of me and he asks for an interview. And he says, "Look, nobody's willing to talk about this content. Will you?" And so I look at it, and it basically sums up that John Brennan illegally held stock in a government contracting company so that he could profit from terror activity. And I said, well, hey, look, that makes complete sense to me. So I conducted the interview with John, and he says, any way you can help to get this story out would be great. He says, I cannot personally publish the material because I have a conflict of interest with the FBI. I've already tried to tip them off to the research. They've turned a deaf ear, in so much that he even lost his private contractor job. They fired him. He had submitted the key elements of this research to the FBI back when John Brennan is physically in the Obama administration. The FBI did nothing about it, and he came to work the next morning for his private contractor. They brought him into his office. And says, "Did you just reach out to the FBI submitting a tip to them?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "I see crimes are being committed, and they need to be exposed, and the FBI needs to look into it and do something about it." And they said, "Well, you no longer work for us." So he not only got the FBI shunned him, but he lost his job with his private contracting company. But he stuck to the grind. So when I meet him, I look at this and I says, "Okay, well, you know what, John, I'm going to do everything I can to get this information out." And it took shy of 2 years to get it published. Initially, Skyhorse. I was on the phone with Tony Lyons and my intel source. 2 different conversations, about 40 minutes each. Tony was very interested in the work, but then this fellow that I knew works as a literary agent in New York, connected me to Post Hill, and Post Hill simply was a little more aggressive in getting it out. And we went through a couple edits, went through their legal advice. Their lawyer said they almost stopped it completely. It literally went dead cold. But I kept working with the CEO of Post Hill, and he says, "Okay, well, you know what? Let's go back. Let's edit it again, and then we're gonna release it." So, you know, I want listeners and viewers to realize that Post Hill Press they are taking a major risk here. They are to be credited for really pushing this information out, and so. You know, it just so happens, again, I mentioned it earlier, William, Mark Shaw, his book Abuse of Power is being released by Post Hill Press. So if there is a publisher out there right now in America that's really working with all of their forces to get some of this real credible information that needs to be distributed from coast to coast, that would be Post Hill Press. That is a solid publishing house. And Anthony Zaccardi, who's the guy that I've worked with, he's the CEO. They've got an office in New York and they've got an office in Nashville. He's the one that really pushed this and says, no, we're gonna get this out. And like I first presented when I first presented the book to Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower, he looks at it and goes to the back and he says, oh, you've got an entire massive appendix that supports all of the allegations in your book. He says, you know, that's incredible. He says, that is something that I don't particularly have in Google Leaks. And he says, that's what's going to add the level of credibility that is needed for Americans to really understand some of the criminality that's happening in the upper echelon of their government. And so it's going to be very difficult. You know, you get them on perjury. Sounds like, you know, the Southern District of Florida is administering that. They're going to get him in the courtroom, I suspect. I don't know, but that would have to be under an indictment. I don't know what's going to happen. I think he's going to be indicted, and my goal is that he's forced into answering questions regarding the contents of this book titled "High Stakes Treason: How John Brennan Compromised American Security for Millions." What we know is that he did not stop either of those bombings. That was the Christmas Day underwear bombing that was landing in Detroit. He didn't stop that bombing. He didn't stop a NATO allied bombing, Anders Breivik. Those 2 attacks that he performed, and then the main one that really hit home for me when I first met John Donovan. He's the guy that is credited for the intelligence research in this book. When I realized that John Brennan essentially allowed, that's the allegation, he allowed the Boston Marathon bombing to happen and go through so that he could enrich himself on the back end with stocks held in this company that was known as the Analysis Corporation that he had served as president of prior to working in the Obama administration. And the other thing is that the Counterterrorism Center, the National Counterterrorism Center, is a department that John Brennan himself established. He was the main person that organized that. So this guy Thomas Speciale, right, that confronts him is essentially nothing more than one of his tree branches, right? If you're starting with the creation of the Analysis Corporation, which developed as a result of an executive order for Bush after the 9/11 attacks, that's John Brennan. He's sitting for 2 decades. 30 decades, 30-something, 31 years, I think is what he served in the CIA in total. But he's sitting in this whole terrorism department, if you will, or of in the U.S. And he's literally setting the stage. He's engineering this manipulation. It's a complete monopoly he created for himself. A total manipulation of the system. And so he's in a prime position when Obama gets into office, which I believe that was rigged. Again, my argument for that is the deep state is creating this yin and the yang effect, right? They're creating a dialectic. It's a Hegelian dialectic, thesis, antithesis. They're deliberately creating it. It takes them decades to do that, but they're so close now with Trump in office.
They're grooming people, but the agenda stays the same, and the bureaucrats, just like Especiali said, they're still there. I mean, it's really incredible.
Yeah,
this is your YouTube channel too, by the way. I just happened upon it, so people go subscribe. I'll put a link to this. People can watch this video again. Please continue.
Great. Yeah. I got I unfortunately, like most of these media, these kind of social media, I get flagged on YouTube. Instagram doesn't typically flag me, but Jason Fick is a guy I've been working with for a few years. He's trying to get some litigation on Section 230, get that rewritten in regards to censorship. But what we have right now with John Brennan is basically you've got the guy red-handed. I'll give the backstory on how Roger Stone got involved. So I've got this binder. I turn it into a book. I go through the chapters. I keep basically when you order the book and you read through the book, what you're getting is an FBI report. That's the grade of information that you're getting, because like I said, my intel source plopped down the research to me. I go through it chapter by chapter. I personally vet it, of course, because I'm putting my name on it. And then I find two different publishers that are willing to take it on, and that was Skyhorse and Post Hill. Post Hill pulled the trigger. They gave me the contract and pulled the trigger. It wasn't easy. Very, very difficult. Like I said, it was stuck in the mud after their lawyer looked at it. We made a couple changes. None of the critical information was taken out. I just reworded some things, and it was released. So one of the first people I approached when I had this information, when I had all the receipts, if you will, it was General Mike Flynn. I'd known Mike from touring the country as a podcaster and as an independent media source through the COVID lockdowns. Primarily is when I know Mike Flynn, a guy named the Reawaken Tour was the name of that tour. And so I approached General Flynn about the information, and initially he says, "Yeah, I'll write the forward." But then he gets busy and he pushes it out. And I was working with a publisher to try to get this thing out real quick, right? So as fast as I could. So I really couldn't wait. And during that time, William, I had also approached John Kiriakou. And John is a guy that's immediately answered, says he'd do it. Brooks Agnew I had approached about doing a blurb and then what he delivered and became one of the forwards. So I've got Kiriakou and I got Brooks Agnew writing forwards, and I'm kind of in the back. I'm waiting for Flynn's schedule to clear up so that he can deliver a forward. And in that time, I'm in Florida, and I'm at Mar-a-Lago. I'm at an event in Mar-a-Lago where it happens that James O'Keefe is there, and Roger Stone is at the event. Well, this is the story that I like to tell because it's actually kind of interesting. So whoever's giving the talk in the ballroom, it was one of the side ballrooms, not the main ballroom. Whoever's giving the talk, everybody's listening to, and so there's no activity out in the lobby. Roger stands up, and I figure, he's gonna go take a whiz, right? He's going to the restroom. I can just kind of tell he's the only guy standing up. Everybody else is listening. So let me, because I hadn't had a chance to talk to him at that point. So I said, this is a good time for me to just get up and just see if I can approach him. Well, he's walking pretty fast and brisk, so I couldn't stop him where the chandelier was in the ballroom, and he goes into the restroom. I said, he's going to take a leak. So I go into the restroom. I say, look, Roger, I'm so-and-so, da-da-da-da. I'd met him a few times, so I don't think he knew me by name, but he probably recognized my face. Like I said, I met him a few times before that. And immediately said, Roger, I'm not here to take a leak. I'm not here to use the restroom. I'm here to send you information that I have on John Brennan. He says, send it right over. Just like that, William. He's like, send it right over. There was no pause. There was no pushback. Hey, get out of here. I got to, give me some privacy. It was send this over. I sent it over to him. And within 24 hours, he shoots me a text back and he says, you want me to write this forward for you. And I'm like, Roger, look, I've got General Flynn that's he's already said he'd write the forward, but he doesn't have the time right now. And he says, "Boy, hold on, no, wait a second. Let me think about what I've just said to you. You need me to write your forward. You want me to write your forward." And it kind of it resonates with me, and I'm like, "Oh, right, yeah, okay, yeah, I do want you to write me forward. So go ahead, Roger." And he writes this incredible forward, right? He writes. I mean, when you read what he's written, it's just really great. This guy is so opposed to John Brennan. It's incredible. I mean, this guy literally wants him tried for treason, and he doesn't say that lightly. Of course, the allegations are the allegations, but if they're proven true, which I believe they will be in a court of law, there's no reason for them not to be. What we're finding is that this individual provided aid and comfort to an enemy during a time of war. So the use of the word treason is not just kind of thrown out there lightly, because the global war on terror had already been declared, and it was being conducted. Right? It wasn't over until Biden got into office and withdrew troops out of Afghanistan. That's when the global war on terror ceased to exist. But during the time that John Brennan is committing these crimes, the alleged crimes, is right smack dab in the middle of the global war on terror under Barack Obama. And he is providing aid and comfort to the enemy by giving them visas, by allowing them to enter the country to conduct terror activity.
There's real questions, mysteries around the Tsarnaev brothers and being able to leave and come back and do a lot of stuff. There's a background there some people conveniently overlook. And Roger Stone literally called Brennan, he may be the greatest villain of the 20th century. So he's not using kind of wishy-washy terms when he's talking about Brennan. There's a lot here. Do you have time to look at some of these comments? Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Trottier? You can just put them in the comments. Do you have time, Ian?
Absolutely, I do.
Okay,
Yeah.
Let's see. Kind of been flagging it. This is disappointing that Trump is taking long to imprison the treasonous traitors. There's 51 of these guys. These guys are getting reference for criminal acts and things like that. But another one. This is my story. Why aren't these evil criminals getting arrested and jailed? Good question. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know. I don't. My opinion is because of all the criminality. Bondi being, she doesn't seem to be the right person for the job. That's me. Vatican's agenda. Go ahead.
My comment here is folks need to understand. If you're read this book by Anthony Sutton called The Federal Reserve Conspiracy. What you're looking at, because that was passed, and I think it was passed in December 22nd, maybe. It was real close to the Congress was off on holiday. There were only a few members, but they got the minimum approved, and that's how it got signed into law. There's a lot of controversy around the Federal Reserve Act being passed, but it was passed. And so let me sum it up this way. So Josh Yoder, Yoder, is an American Airlines pilot that was opposed to vaccination mask and vaccine mandates to board aircrafts, and he was basically the tip of the spear to get American Airlines to sway away from United's stance. United is really pushing that stuff, but Southwest Airlines, American, some of their pilots formed a nucleus to oppose those mandates. So I'm in San Antonio and I'm talking to Josh. He's become a friend of mine. I'm talking to Josh and I says, Josh, I said, look, the best way to look at this, and this is before I'd gotten into this Brennan issue, William. This is at least a year and a half before that, maybe 2 years. I says, Josh, the best way to look at this, what I'm telling you, is this. I says, the Federal Reserve is a monopolistic, private organization that doesn't best represent the constitutionality of the republic, right, and the best interest of we the people. It's a private organization. It's a centralized bank. It's really opposed to the Constitution. And he says, wait, so are you telling me that as a country we gained our physical independence, but yet we never gained our economic independence? And I says, that's exactly what I'm telling you. So if you take that into consideration and you read the book by Sutton, Federal Reserve Conspiracy, then you'll understand that the Oval Office itself, regardless of whoever's occupying it, it can be used against the people. It can be manipulated. Now, discovering exactly who's doing that manipulations going to be incredibly difficult, because as the Federal Reserve regulates the economics of the government, we as the people, we have no idea who are the shareholders of the Federal Reserve. There's a veil there, right? That we can't, it doesn't get audited. So to look at, so if I pull back, right? I pull back and I say, wait a second, I don't want communism in this country. I mean, it's never, you're telling me a capitalistic society has created the greatest country on the planet, and then you want to insert what are considered failed forms of government, i.e. communism, socialism? No, it doesn't have any place in this country. It shouldn't be in here. But yet then you're looking at Donald Trump and you're saying, okay, Mondami reaches out to him, wants to meet with him, and you say, as Donald Trump, you say, okay, yeah, come into my office. And you've got a communist in the Oval Office that you're, more or less kind of, you're buddying with him, I mean, well, wait, no, why is that happening? So where are people's ethics? Even for the president, why didn't he draw the line and say, no, I'm sorry, you were elected to the position of mayor of New York City. I don't support that. No, I'm not going to be meeting with you. No, you were not invited into the White House. Why don't you take that line? Why don't you take that stance? I mean, I get diplomacy, but on the flip side, you're not doing that with Maduro, and you've got something like 25% of our naval fleet right now in the Caribbean with their guns pointed at Venezuela, like you're ready to invade. So where's the diplomacy there, right? So you're bringing diplomacy in with Mondami, but you're not bringing diplomacy in Maduro. Again, it's how are they getting away with some of this stuff? What we've got to do as citizens is we've really got to peel back the layers and figure out exactly who's controlling the politics from behind the shadows, because this is nothing new. Right? It was Eisenhower, right? Even Eisenhower talked about the military-industrial complex. Folks, JFK, it's the 24th, 2 days ago, we celebrated the anniversary of JFK getting his head blown off, right? And he was very outspoken against the CIA, very outspoken against the Federal Reserve. He inserted treasury notes into currency. He got removed immediately when he was dead by LBJ. Those were silver certificate-backed currencies by our treasury. We are like, we're in big trouble. It's nothing new, right? I mean, we were in big trouble before I was even born. And so that's my comment. That's what I would say to folks is it's time to really, you've got to ask questions. And what I physically did, right? So people look at me and say, hey, okay, you've authored this book. Well, look, what I am doing is I'm essentially demanding that the contents be investigated by Congress. That is what I'm asking. Okay, I can't make that demand, but I am asking as an independent citizen researcher, I'm exhorting Congress to look into that information. So that's my hope, is that once he's back under oath, you basically grab the book, you ask questions in regard, and if it's contrary to the appendix, which is 106 pages of photocopies, right? We got photocopies, screenshots, it's all right there. How do you get around that? Right? You know what I mean? How do you get around that? And right now, Tulsi Gabbard, and for the next 3 years, she has seemingly, we're going to assume she does, but she's got it right now. She's got the authority to go into the NSA and get those what are called code word compartments exposed. And the information held in those code word compartments, which only she would have access to, would prove the treasonous acts that John Brennan has laid on the American people.
Have you ever heard of Brennan being at OKC, that he was involved or somewhere around the Oklahoma City bombing?
Wow. I have not heard that, William.
I haven't either.
Have you?
No, I had no idea. Somebody mentioned that in the
comment?
Comment, yeah. And what about Petraeus? Do you know if Petraeus is around or surrounding all this stuff?
That's another, some of these other former heads of the CIA. I don't know, and that's really good to bring that type of thing up, because I did mention George Tenet, and if, let's just hypothetically say as a republic, we are successful. We are successful in exposing the crimes of John Brennan and the CIA. What I believe that does then, and I've used the term dominoes falling, because what you're doing is, it's not just John Brennan isolated. And I like the comment regarding Petraeus. You've got a whole organization. Let's remember, you got a whole organization that John F. Kennedy wanted to splinter into 1,000 pieces. John F. Kennedy, arguably one of the best, the greatest. Abe Lincoln, right? Washington, he's right up there. He's one of the best commanders that we've had. But you wanted him to splinter the CIA. So if you're exposing John Brennan, you're exposing really some of the real wrongdoings of the CIA. And an immediate effect, I think, is you're going to find George Tenet. You're going to find the involvement, I believe, that exists out there. You find, if you expose Brennan, you're going to find he was chief of staff under Tenet during 9/11. You're going to start to expose some of the criminal activity that happened on that day. As an example, again, this is my viewpoint, simply opinion. The building number 7 under Shorenstein, right? You're exposing. That had nothing to do with the CIA, probably, but it had to do with an element of the deep state above the CIA, and so that's what I think is online here with the information in high stakes treason. Is you're affecting at least 200 other people that are close to John Brennan, that have been close to John Brennan over the past couple decades, that know stuff that aren't talking about that kind of thing, and so you've got right now with high stakes treason, in my opinion, you have probably the most damaging book to the deep state that has existed, far more than what we had during Watergate. That is what I believe the contents of this book pose. You can really do some damage to this hidden government, the strings of the hidden government with John Brennan, because he's left a paper trail, right? And there's a word I want to mention here. It's called data mining. Me personally, I don't have the training, William. I simply don't have the training to be able to get into some of the unclassified documents of X Keyscore, relate them to some of the activity that John Brennan was doing, and give that as a report. That is what I have brought to the public. That is what I have brought with Post Hill Press for the American people to now read, is this research, the compilation, due to that term, his ability to understand and know how to data mine and bring and aggregate and compile the information that I've named high stakes treason. It's really a great gift to the American people. I don't think there's never been anything like it, really, that zeroes in on a bad actor and shows the crimes that he committed, because he allowed himself to be enriched in this government contractor that changed names, but we knew them for at least 15 years as the Analysis Corporation. He enriched himself on illegally held stocks. It's a conflict of interest.
Did he not disclose? Did he not disclose his ownership of those stocks? Is that what happened?
That is correct.
Gotcha, so
what we have, William, is a 2009 ethics waiver that was given to him by Norm Eisen, an attorney under Barack Obama. Rachel Molinaro meets with John Brennan.
Are you talking about lawfare Norm Eisen? That one? Mr. Lawfare himself? That one? Oh, jeez.
What we have is
cesspool of corruption. Holy smokes.
They're falsities, false official statements. And we've got the paper trail here. For John Brennan, unfortunately, we've got the paper trail thanks to my intel source. It's all there, man. I mean, wow. This guy's a dead dog. He's a dead dog. And I hate to say that, but he's done some very bad things to the American people, allegedly. Okay, right? Allegedly. Right.
Well, they're finding enough evidence on the whole Russian collusion thing to refer for prosecution. So, like, that's enough to. I mean, they should have been done a long time ago. But I mean, it's the thing is these guys were involved in so much skullduggery, and they're always monetizing their actions. So there's some kind of NGO or some kind of corporation that benefits from their policy decisions, whether it's Biden or anybody really. I've never seen it not happen. So there's always some kind of financial scam, or even the Epstein documents. He's trying to monetize everything, but yeah, it's just so seedy. And I mean, so Analysis Corporation. When I was growing up, even before 2001, Echelon was kind of like the big term people would say for like data mining and getting information. All of your calls were kept by Echelon. Is Analysis Corporation supposed to be some kind of like pre-Palantir corporation? I don't know.
Oh, you talk about Palantir, and I think a comment had to do with MTG, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's made some really iffy stock trades regarding Palantir. So, and I know Laura Loomer. I haven't spoken to Laura Loomer, but I know Laura Loomer's been obviously very critical of Marjorie Taylor Greene. I personally, I think that was a cowardly move. I don't know Marjorie. I never met her. I did meet her once, but I don't know her, right? And I think that was to walk away, to resign from that position. And a comment that I read was that she's walking away. I think it's on the 5th of January. That's just like 2 or 3 days after she qualifies for her lifetime Congress pension. So she's
90% of her salary,
walking away.
baby. 90% of her salary. It's a freaking golden, the most gilded parachute imaginable, pure gold, and healthcare for the rest of your life.
And yeah, right. You know, I mean, not to say again, I was critical of Trump, and I'm not in that position, so it's difficult for me to say what I would do and what I wouldn't do if I was in Trump's position. But you know, I was certainly critical of him bringing a communist into the Oval Office to joke about him being a fascist. Again, that's just me being on the outside and not being in that position.
Yeah, but it's their weird terminology. It's commie terminology where if you're not a communist, you're a fascist, even though Biden was probably one of the greatest fascists of all time. We are at the 60-minute mark. We had a couple hundred live listeners. Thanks for listening, everybody. Go check that out. Do you have a website? I know you have a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I've got 2 websites I can direct to folks. High Stakes Treason is a website you can go and order the book from, and you can get some of the other quotes. Some of the other interviews I've done. Matt Gaetz, I was on his show. I've been with Bannon a couple times. Stone Zone, Roger Stone, Mel K. That was a great show I did with Mel. I've done quite a few interviews. So that's highstakestreason.com. If you want a signed copy, you can just order from me directly and me. And then to get some of the background stuff that I've done the past few years since 2016 when I started the podcast, that's iantrottier.com.
Ian Trottier. So you can see the Ian Trottier. Let me see if I can pull this off here. There's the cover of the book again. Stop screen, share screen.
That's a dirty dog right there, William. He's a dirty dog. That's a dirty dog.
Bigger than Watergate, guys. Roger Stone, one of the most important and shocking books I've read in my 50 years in politics, man. Unbelievable stuff, man.
Yeah, and he just released an article on Stone Zone. It's called Shadows of Betrayal, and it's a review of this book. So he's had me on his radio show, and he just released a write-up on Stone Zone regarding the book.
And your book has like 100 pages of archive, so it's not just like a book, a narrative of this stuff. It's actually a data transference, so people can actually read the real documents, right? Like, I think it's in the like.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Which is important.
Exactly right.
You have them now in like a solid form where somebody isn't tampering with them, or like all kinds of things. Unimaginable disinformation is out there. So you've got all the stuff regarding the Security and Exchange. You've got media reporting. Biden offers OIG stuff, employment history, all kinds of documents down there. So people can check that out.
I've got employment history on people that Brennan was working with outside of him, right? And that's a great kind of meme, right? This artist is really awesome.
Oh, I mean, the Biden
So that's
administration and even Obama, they're paying themselves out of the public fisc. I mean, just the corruption is off the charts. You can't even believe the comprehended. I think that a majority of our debt is just fraud. Like they just stole everything. Um, is there anything you'd like to add or anything amiss? How do you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, no, I just buy the book, make it a stocking stuffer. It's get your friends to buy it. Obviously, that's what we're doing is pushing this message out. Unfortunately, the allegations in the book, I've sent one to Pam Bondi. I'm going to continue to push this information out. My intel source had a death threat. His family ostracized him. Again, when I first met him, nobody even do a podcast with him. And of course, Biden was in office at that point. I don't know that Post-Hill would have published this had Trump not gotten back in office. The climate right now is ripe for people to kind of digest this type of information. And I would go at it from a nonpartisan or bipartisan, if you will, angle. This isn't about politics, right? So it's not about. Oh, thanks, William. Oh wait,
that's Bartow Films. Bartow Films.
Appreciate that. This isn't about just because I'm opposed to communism, right? That's just my opinion.
I'm totally opposed to communism. I think communism is the most rotten doctrine imaginable. It's horrible. They never produce anything. They're not productive people. They're constantly aggrieved too culturally. They're just always whining about something. They never take proactive steps. Let
me insert this, William, because I think you're
I'm not a capitalist either, so I'm somewhere in some netherworld, yeah, but still.
But this is an interesting take on the origins of communism, right? Karl Marx's Das Kapital. This is Communist Manifesto. This is the origin of where there's a historian. Now, Brian Artis is a friend of mine. He's actually one of the first people to get a copy of this book, and he was outspoken against remdesivir and some of these the COVID things. But along that line is a guy named Eric John Phelps. He's an historian, and he talks. And I'm just going to insert this because it's interesting. He talks about something called the Paraguayan reduction system, which was basically a European effort to, without using slavery, to conform indigenous people down in Paraguay. Phelps says that was the nexus for creating what became known as communism. So really interesting if viewers take a historical approach to kind of where these things
Marx argued that communism was the natural state of man, that sharing and doing all that stuff was going all the way back to hunter-gatherer times. That was his idea, but there was a lot of trading going on there. There's a lot of bartering and things like that. So it's you can test a tree by its fruits, and the fruits of communism, which is mass death, democide, and
they're just
this remdesivir stuff was all intentional. And you want to talk about Palantir and all these things, like they're finding out that Palantir was behind application of COVID, like who got certain treatment, who got on the breathing apparatus, which is basically a death sentence. But probably is another. The corruption's off the charts, guys. It's so corrupt, and there is a thing. I also had a lot of my guests are on this Post-Hill Press. I actually had Nils Gravilius. I saw his book was on there, so that's cool. Mark Shaw and Robert Spencer, who's an Islam critic, which people should check out Spencer's stuff. And it's the age of assassinations. People are getting threatened, job losses. These are very rough times. Like, you try to tell the truth, they'll come after you. Like, I can speak from experience. You wouldn't believe the stories I've experienced. I can't even talk about it. Actually, I tell people the truth would discredit me. They wouldn't believe it. But I will put a link to your website, Ian Trottier. It's Trottier. And then also the High Stakes Treason. I'll put a link to the book. I see that there's I think there's a audio book. There's a Kindle,
Yeah.
there's a paperback. It has great reviews already, so people check it out and get it. Also as like a data transference, so get it out. These people are like loitering around. They're dangerous. The CFR. A lot of these guys are actually promoted by the CFR to fulfill agendas and things like that we don't see. So understand, like you talked about, that and the Federal Reserve are very important. But thanks everybody for listening. Please share the shows. And again, the full title of the book is High Stakes Treason: How John Brennan Compromised American Security for Millions, with a foreword by Roger Stone. And the author again is Ian Trottier. Thanks so much for your time. Stay there. Stay there. I have to just